Their stamina was low, weapons close to breaking and usable items depleted. And the boss, he was mightily imposing, with seemingly unlimited hit points. "Boys, it has been an honor fighting alongside you," Goen told his companions, his fingers, gripping his warhammer for perhaps the last time. "Let us give this our all, and die like men, in a frenzy of unbridled bloodlust. I see no way of inflicting sufficient damage to ensure victory," said Spain. Lowell shrugged. The boss bounced to the energetic battle music. "Perhaps," said Charles, "you would let me go first this combat?" Spain laughed. A hearty guffaw that soon infected Goen, and Lowell, too, who roared as misbecomes an elf. "What possible harm could it do?" he said. "We have lost now anyway." "Thanks," said Charles, producing a small control panel with a single red button. He pressed the button. From somewhere behind them there came a rumbling sound, interrupted by a fiery explosion. For a few tense moments, silence, nothing happening. Then a missile hit the boss. Smoke. Bang. And when the smoke had cleared, the boss was gone, his hit points 0. And in the place he'd stood there rose a cloud. "Whoa," said Goen. "Perhaps it is my extremely low HP talking, but I have to say, that cloud sure does remind me of a mushroom," said Lowell. "What in the worlds was it?" asked Spain. "That," said Charles, "is what we call an atomic bomb." They collected their loot, divvied up their experience, leveled up their skills, and upgraded their gear, and then they moved on. This time Charles went first, and the Tigrisian, the elf, and the dwarf followed. The next world was a desert world. "Sandrea," Charles said. "Tell us about it," said Lowell, and Spain agreed. And Charles relayed his knowledge. On the other side of the force field, the player adjusted his glasses. There were still many worlds to go, many foes to defeat, and many challenges to pass, but he was hopeful. For the first time since he'd started this run, he began to dream of victory. The day started normal, get on your bird and patrol around. Griffin riders rarely deal with petty crimes, but they can assist whatever they see. So far, he tallied 8 thieves, 2 fights, 1 madman, and 6 vandals. His partner, Dave, had insisted he schedule his whole lunch break and all his recreational breaks in one block for today. Why? Wand shopping, neither of them had a magical focus, and it restricted both how heavy and light they could be, leaving them on patrol shifts and sentry duty. It was the pride of the elves that magic came easy, so Rosfet, or Ross by way of his orcish partner, could etch runes into surfaces he defined. In the air, on the ground, moving with him, stationary, the works. But without a focus, it was like building a shelter without carving tools. Functional, if crude. Still, expedience is the mother of finesse, and Ross could cast so fast some people missed it by blinking. Dave was much simpler as his manager use. Body, enhancement. The man could become a boulder or a feather on command, but could project outwards for his life, except in dramatic entrances. Someone in their group recently caught a focus that let them reach their spells out nearly to the horizon, and Dave was enamored. He insisted, traded shifts with other riders for an hour at least, until they both had their extended lunch to shop a wand shop at the foot of the town. It was a wood hut, with seemingly random symbols carved around its walls. The entrance door was dug half into the ground with a little ramp leading to it. Moss and climbing ivy were everywhere, with stones meeting the corners of everything structural, making the overhang of the roof look more precarious than functional. Dave bounced like a child about to get presents and practically hopped to the door, shouldering it open like handles were imaginary. Ross followed slowly, letting the orc get out his excitement. When he did get inside, he noted the shift. Instead of cold and damp, poorly put together, the inside of the hut was expanded vastly, by spatial magic turning it almost into a guild lounge. The wood was precise, square, and finished with a shine. Fixtures were all polished brass and clear glass. Racks along the walls displayed staffs, wands, and all other kinds of casting mediums that hummed with power. Worried as Ross might be about his excitable partner, it relived him that every item on display growled angrily whenever Dave got too close. They met the front desk together. the elf taking the opportunity to munch on a packed sandwich while the orc bounced on his toes. After an almost impolite amount of waiting, a human in ragged-looking pants and a heavy tunic came down the stairs. Their hair stuck in a chaotic bedhead and marks on their face from sleeping on something that stuck into them, they trudged around to the back of the counter and covered a big yawn before offering their welcome spiel. "Welcome to Magic Breaks You. Might I take your orders?" she asked, rubbing her eye with the too big, too thick tunic. Dave was unfazed. "I have magic for my inside, but I need help getting it on my outside." He bounced as he told her, getting more excited when she asked to examine his hand. He offered his whole arm, and she poked along it, seemingly dead dry of mana herself, as she looked to read his palm and test his forearm for firmness. Big Green and Buff himself was far too happy to show off and started doing poses, only getting more enthusiastic when she asked for specific poses. Ross walked off to the side and sat on a bench as he waited for Chaos and Morning Breath to finish their charades, only for the shopkeep to shuffle off to the back room after telling Dave to wait up front. "So what do you think?" the work asked him, leaning just a bit too close. He sighed and pushed the big lug to a better distance as he swallowed his bite. "I think whoever makes these is off on an adventure and you're going to get a test piece instead." Aw, so uncharitable. "The makes the things. She told me she's looking for something she made a while back that I might do good with." Dave bounced and raved while he orbited the bench, as much a giddy kid as Ross remembered from the orc's school days. Dave went on and on as the elf ate his sandwich, the clerk coming back out with a pile of quietly crackling casting media. She roughly dumped them onto the counter, and Dave was across from her before she could blink. She showed him intricate cuffs and strips of cloth or leather, short, stout bricks acting like wands, and a variety of weapons that could channel magic. Eventually, they picked out a set of nearly blank brass knuckles. When Dave gripped them, something clicked and his mana lined up with the knuckles just right. Echoing between them was the raw, elemental force the orc always had, and a finer reflection of it bouncing off the knuckles. A few test swings had arcs of fire and sand materialize around his fists, and even smaller things when Dave bit his tongue. And tried, though lighting a candle on his thumb was a pretty basic starting point. The clerk heaved a sigh and listed the price. Dave paid without a thought and wandered around the shop summoning elemental effects with a grin. Ross walked up to the counter, still working on his sandwich. Before he could speak, she held up a hand and pulled out two staffs. One was straight with a ton of bends near its top. The other was more traditional and gently twisted all over. She poked him with both, nodding to herself as they buzzed like angry bees before she put them back and left to the back again. He stood, mildly confused and idly munching for a while before she came back out with three options. One was two metal tubes arranged side by side with a wooden shaft that bent down after capping off the tubes. Another was a short staff that married to a point on one end and curved down into a V feature on the other, adorned all over by metal accents. The third was two failed-looking staffs melded together, the first a rod of metal and burned down to its glassy core, the second a twofull of nature mana, trying to sprout leaves and regrow flesh where hide touched it. The first staff sucked up the excess from the second, and the second provided a buffer and mounting surface for the first. His eyes lingered on the failed experiment before he grabbed the second option presented. It clicked, drawing his mana down. Channels that seemed overbroad and blank, but as he began shaping runes, he found those channels let the wand cast the effect without showing or even broadcasting what he was doing. He smiled to himself and used the smaller channels to put finer detail on the internal runes, pleased with the result. "How much?" he asked. The clerk looked him over and shrugged. 2 gold. Ross considered for a while. 1 gold was 1,000. Silver. He got paid a little over 2 silver per each good arrest he helped with, plus 1 gold a month. Considering the speed and range Maria watched the elf as gears turned in his head, clearly calculating something, but she was too tired to mess with it. She gathered up her pile of sticks and walked it back to the back. Carefully putting each back in its own little space where it could relax and enjoy its company, the twin staff getting put in its own section of bipolar creations. She paused there and listened, gently stroking on one that wanted to go out and see the world, experience joy and triumph. Unfortunately, the prosthetic arm was hard to market, as having a personality was frowned upon in the world of wands. Once the poor thing was calmed down, she headed back up front, seeing the 2 gold on the counter and smiling. Back to an empty shop with no assumptions, the whole thing shrank down and her workshop dropped into its center. Her idea today? Food wizard. How much magic can a rolling pin channel? How much can a skillet do for its cook? But it wasn't the spark of inspiration she usually worked off of. Nevertheless, she would bring up enough motivation to start. I stayed out all night again doing nothing, haunting the city, I guess. I take the bus in, then walk. I told my wife I was drinking, looking for drugs. She believed me, but didn't have the decency to get fucking mad. She's just concerned. Not just saying the words, but actually meaning them. I was looking for a fight and all I got was empathy. How much of a loser am I, right? My kids tell me they love me every day and I spend my days feeling like absolute shit. Maybe it's because I pretend all the time that I don't believe in the sincerity of others. I bought some spray paint today. Recapturing lost youth, but at least it's artistic. There's so much noise in the world. One of my daughters is sick. Not caught a cold sick. Running tests to figure out the damage sick and planning to buy meds. We can't afford on my salary sick and being on a wait list for a procedure for 7 fucking years. Sick. Walking tonight, I kept thinking about my old boss's funeral. So many interviews and TV specials, and it's like no one remembers him anymore. At the same time, his daughter wouldn't be dying because her dad was too much of a terrified fuck-up to get anywhere in life. Note: link to Soho Stone. Plan: attempt precision dating. Outcome: plausibility passed. Note: begin formal write-up of hypothesis to present at symposium. Note: inform Nork and query opinion. Went out to the city tonight and did my first spray job in 20 years. Felt good despite the hands being rusty. Nothing major, just a quick poem I'd written a few weeks ago, but then I crossed it out anyway and wrote something else. Something true. Something sincere. You know what was good about the whole thing? Other than not getting caught, because how embarrassing would that be? It's not me anymore. I'm no graffiti artist. After I was done and the adrenaline had gone down, all I wanted was to be home again. The Universal Archivist Pix disconnected from the central mainframe and telecommunicated to the Universal Archivist Nork. The 2 Universal Archivists were good colleagues, despite that Nork had achieved greater scholarship fame than Pix because his research activities concerned a planet exponentially more interesting and universally significant than Earth. Goody on, Nork said Pix. Goody on, Pix, replied Nork. Do you possess useful information to submit? I possess it, said Pix. Please make submission, said Nork. I submit I have developed a plausible hypothesis about the identity of the creator of the Soho Stone, said Pix. The Soho Stone, said Nork, referencing briefly the central mainframe. One of the few surviving physical artifacts from the obscure planet you have determined to study. Who do you hypothesize is the creator? He is unnamed, said Pix, for the digital files he was studying never identified their writer. The currently stated creator of the Soho Stone is unknown, said Nork. Is it your intention to appear before the symposium to make rational argument in favor of amending the creator to unnamed? That is my intention, said Pix. Do you not believe such a change is quite minor? Asked Nork. Not all archival revision must be radical, said Pix. In addition, I believe that names are not always of primary significance. The information I have gathered, collated, and transcribed provides great insight into an individual Earthling and, by linking such insight to the Soho Stone, I believe I will add much scholarship value to the archive's exhibit. I support your submissions. They are well-founded, said Nork. Thank you, said Pix. Goodbye, Pix, said Nork. Goodbye, Nork, said Pix, and ended the telecommunication. After reconnecting to the central mainframe, he navigated to the entry on the Soho Stone. It read, Origin, Earth, Dead, c. 17th-22nd century AD, local time. Description, fragment of presumed larger structure composed of limestone and clay being overlaid with the following symbols. The only gold is the setting sun, all else amounts. To non-coins clatter in a purse, as the rich man with distinction passes by, decomposing in the rattling hearse. The above is obscured by a large X, and several irregular lines, below which the symbols continue. I fucking love my wife and daughters. The boy. Above is underlined. Significance. One of 3 surviving physical artifacts from its planet of origin. Creator. Unknown. Although Pix had long ago memorized the entire central mainframe entry about the Soho stone, he still enjoyed viewing its submissions. It kept his scholarly spirits up. He turned now to the only remaining information in his research he was sure succeeded the entry, which he hypothesized described the creation of the Soho stone. I got home so late last night it was early. I thought everyone would be asleep, but my wife and daughters were all up. They were sitting in the living room together and hadn't noticed me come in. The sun was just beginning to rise, filling the room with a gorgeous light, and they were talking, all 3 of them, whispering, about what I don't know, and it didn't matter. The words didn't matter, these words don't matter, because what I heard then, I'll never forget. It was a sound, pure, simple, and beautiful. It was the hum. Enjoy another story. He's going to choose another elf, said Spain, the Tigresian battle mage. Would that be so bad? Asked the elvish healer Lowell. He must choose a dwarf, said Gowan the dwarf. The party must be hardy. Magic may be clever, but the quest is won or lost in the fray. He'll pick an elf. He is a wise one, said Lowell. How do you know? Asked Gawain. You can tell by his shadow, visible on the other side of the force field, said Spain. This one wears glasses. Ones who wear glasses know numbers, and ones who know numbers have longer runs. That is a sign of wisdom. He's about to click, said Lowell. Then, oh no, he added, as beside them materialized a member of the worst race of all, human. Hello, said the human, smiling. I'm Charles. And so it is. One Tigresian magic user that, being myself, one elf to protect us, one dwarf to physically annihilate the enemy, and one human to make up the numbers, said Lowell. Are you sure the player is a glasses wearer? Said Gowan. I'm sure. So, human, what is it you do? What are your skills? Your purpose? Asked Lowell. Said Charles. I guess I'm kind of a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none type. Can you wield a war hammer? Asked Gowan. Afraid not, said Charles. Do you conjure, illusion, reanimate, charm, buff, debuff? Nope. Do you detect traps? Asked Gowan. Sometimes, but probably not very reliably, said Charles. I do like to read. If we find books, I can read them. I can also punch. Spain scoffed. If I understand the rules, reading allows me to gain levels more quickly, said Charles. True experience is gained through the killing of enemies, said Gowan. Come, said Lowell. The portal opens, so let our journey begin. To victory, companions, and you too, human. They stepped through, to a world of jungles, ruins, and mischievous monkeys that laughed at them from the canopies above and tried to steal their gear. The first enemies they encountered were weak and easy to defeat, slimes, lizards, rodents. But even against these, which Gowan could smite with but one thudding hammer blow, Charles struggled. He would punch, but he would miss, or the enemy would successfully dodge his punch, or he would hit, but the hit would scarcely do a single point of damage. The other members of the party shook their heads and muttered under their breaths, but bravely, despite the useless human with them, they battled on. Partly thanks to a fortuitous scroll drop that taught Spain Thunderbolt, they beat the jungle, whirled without taking much damage, then proceeded to the first castle. There, as Charles read books, waited out his turns, and pondered while the other rested, they leveled up and defeated the first boss. It was Gowan who delivered the final blow in gloriously violent fashion. How'd you like that, human? He asked afterwards. I'm sorry, said Charles, lifting his head from a notebook he'd crafted, but I missed it. Was it great? Epic, said Spain. And so it continued through the levels and castles and bosses, the party's skills growing as their enemies became more and more formidable. Once in a while, Charles contributed the creation of a crossbow, a mechanical toy shortbow, discovery of painkillers, a magic dust which dulls aches and pains, invention of a compass, always points north, even when we're traveling. South? And other trifles, as Lowell said. But mostly he stood back, letting the others do the fighting, healing, and plundering. He's dead weight, Goen whispered to Lowell. Can't even carry much. Like a child, said Spain. Eventually, they found themselves in a strange and fantastic world none of them had ever seen, one in which ships sailed across the skies. Heavily armored automatons guarded treasures, and sneaky little imps sometimes turned them against one another. What is this place? Said Spain with fear and awe, and not meaning it as a legitimate question. But it's Ozonia, answered Charles. You have been here before, human? Asked Lowell incredulously. Oh, no. Only just read about it, said Charles. By what black magic do these metal birds fly? Asked Goen, pointing at an airship. And how may they be hunted? It's really just physics, said Charles. An undiscovered branch of magic, mused Lowell. More like a series of rules that can be proved by observation and experimentation. For example, if I were to use my crossbow to, shush, human, let us bask in fearful wonder, and they journeyed on. The enemies here were tough, their skills unusual, and their attacks powerful. Progress rested on Lowell's healing spells. Several times Goen was close to death, having valiantly defended his companions from critical hits. When the party finally arrived at Ozonia's boss. There was one magic trick I used to pull. Good one trick it was too, yeah. Made 'em all clap mighty. This trick could be done only at the golden hour. Do you remember that, boy? Yeah. I was lifting my hands into the air and touching. Be the sun with tips of my fingertips, yeah, and pulling out a coin from behind and all 'em clapping and laughing. Remember that, boy? Remember you be clapping and laughing too? He lay there on the hospital bed, emaciated, words rolling slowly off his heavy tongue, punctuated intermittently by the harshness of cleared throats and swallowed phlegm, as I held one of his rough, bony, working man's hands, a hand much like my own, like holding my own hand in that sterile, odorless room, observing him for what the past numberless days had felt each time like the last, observing him as a man, and as my father, and as my fellow countrymen, with tears rolling down my cheeks, thinking, when was the last time I cried? Thinking, don't leave me, you bastard fuck. Not fucking yet. Was be a good trick, wasn't it? Yeah, I said, recalling all the times he'd reached toward the sun and through sleight of hand extracted a single gold coin from behind it, recalling laughing, recalling his smile and his embrace, true and powerful, as if he were hugging me with the force of two, his own and of the mother I never knew, recalling the texture, smell and weight of those perfect coins which as a boy I never could wait to go into the city to spend on some trifle, some semblance of luxury. Yes, it was a good trick, I said, mindful of the clock on the wall and the relentless, silent movement of its hands. In one direction always. Midnight had come and gone, and I had to be at the docks by dawn. A shiver ran through me, and I felt a longing for my wife, who at this late hour is mending clothes for our daughters, who are asleep in a single bed because we've no space for another, and in the flickering candlelight, sole illumination for the needle-piercing threadbare cloth, I feel the regret of a life amounting to but a child's handful of failed dreams slipping insignificantly, like grains of sand, like grains of salt between my thick fingers, burying the ruins of the once great illusion that I am destined, that any of us are destined. Even as perfumed in silken robes, my boss sluices warm brandy down his throat, which is like my throat, but whose soft hands are unlike my hands, unlike the hands of my father which twitch. And I am imagining the taste of brandy when my father said, "What if, yeah, what if it wasn't be a trick, boy?" Several lines here temporarily omitted. Reason, transcription failure. Note, attempt with updated identification model once completed. The Thames flows golden, flows forever, loading, unloading. We, dying embers of the yester, become kindling for the new day as the ships come and ships go into the illuminous space formed by the sky and the sky, reflected timeless and deep upon the canvas of whose pale brilliance we all are rendered featureless, and black silhouetted man, woman, and ship alike. Gulls cut across the brightening sky. Having shut my eyes, I rub my swollen face and spit blood into the river. Note, provisional placement of marked lines. Reason, chronological dilemma. Does one prefer faithfulness to original writing or to events described? Note, consultation may be advised. What do you mean? I asked. But if I expected some reaction from him, some change from the pallid staticity of his dying, none came. His dull eyes kept their blank upward vigil. He merely cleared his throat and said, "Wasn't be any trick about it, ha, yeah. The pull be real. I wasn't be having no coin in hiding, Ken. The pull be real, boy. Ha, yeah. The coins be existing there always behind the sun. So many coins. I shouldn't be touching, but the way 'em clapped, the way you laughed, boy, the way you laughed." He swallowed phlegm. Letting go of his hand, I rose. "What are you saying? I wasn't be knowing any trick, but I could be doing this one thing. Ha, yeah. I could pull Ken." I was be lifting my hands into the air. I grabbed him by the collar and shook him. "The coins? You mean they're really there?" "Behind the sun," he said. "The pull be real," he said, as I shook him, and he offered no resistance. There wasn't any strength left in him at all. He was light as non-existence. "How many?" I demanded, still crying. "Tell me. How many coins are there behind the sun? More than all," he said. "Ha, yeah. Why did we live like we did? If you could have pulled money from the fucking sky, why did you? We were so goddamn poor. We didn't have anything." "I don't have anything," I sobbed, and thinking of my wife and daughters lifted his fragile body and drove him back into the hospital bed, trying to push him through it. Blank-eyed, he cleared his throat, gargled, and sucked down phlegm. "Rattle," he said. "Rattle, boy." Rattle and hum, and for a moment I thought I saw something fill his eyes, something golden, something flowing forever. And reflected in the Thames, I saw a long-ago memory of the two of us on the banks watching the merchant ships. It was, I remembered, the day after I'd been caught spraying graffiti on the school walls. The city's skyline shadow-like. "There be 2 sounds only in the world, boy," I heard him say in the memory, or in the hospital room, or in my own pulsing head, the rattle and the hum, high-lit by the pink setting sun. "This be your education, boy. This be wisdom, Ken? That," he said, pointing, "at the shadow buildings be not your world. Hollowed rattle scum. Hear, boy? Hear the rattle?" But I didn't. And every night I dreamed about living in the city with all its luxuries, with everything modern and easy. "And do you hear that?" he asked, listening. "Listen, be under the rattle. Listen be to the sun. The hum, ha. Yeah, that be the real life, the hard life, the sun, the hum, hum." I let him go, backed away, terrified I might have killed him. End translation source, I. Begin translation source, the Quans. But no, he still clung to life, coughing and wheezing even when I left the room. The hospital. Too furious to go home, too awake to sleep. I looked for another kind of familiar instead, down by the dockyards where I knew I could find the pain I needed, to give and to receive. I went into a bar, downed drinks, and insulted some out-of-town scabby just to get into it with him, and that felt good. The anger. The scabby didn't have a chance, not because I was good at brawling, but because what I wanted was for him to hit me. Hurt me. Heads I win, tails me too. Punch after punch. He beat the snot out of me, broke my nose. I beat what was left of my father's life out of him, cracked a few ribs, all while telling myself my father was out of his mind with dying man's delirium to be talking about coins behind the sun. But that wasn't even what had pissed me off. It wasn't that I believed him. It was that he believed himself, and still thought he'd done right by keeping us poor when all he had to do was pull fucking coins from the fucking sun until we had everything we'd ever dreamed of. What finally put the scabby down was a chair to the face. I slinked out of the bar sore to moonlight uncomfortably louder than it had any right to be, then swung at the moon too. I missed. It wasn't until the next day, after a shift on the docks on no sleep and too much Adderall, that I found out my father had died. Crawling home, I was sure my wife was going to kill me, but she didn't. bless her heart and curse mine. Instead, she wrapped her arms around me, kissed my cheeks, and offered her condolences. Then she pulled me to the bathroom before the girls noticed I was home, and I washed the blood and sweat and stink off myself so that I'd be more presentable when they inevitably decided to snuggle with me. As presentable as anyone could be, with a cracked nose and puffed-out face turning all the bruised colors of the rainbow. Predictable as clockwork, I broke down. End translation source the Goisam. Note: inferring existence here of unlocated paragraphs presumed lost. Begin translation source the third. Note: uncertain temporal relationship between preceding and following paragraphs. Estimation, 2 to 4 years. Note: estimate open to revision. I haven't been writing much lately. I've spent more of my free time reading my old notebooks and journals. Truthfully, I'm ashamed of much of what I wrote before, yet there's something that prevents me from destroying it. It's a reflection of who I was at the time. What I was. I want to remember that. I don't want to forget myself. Reading, I feel again the stress I was under, the drugs I was taking, the thoughts I started and never finished. I miss my father. I took the girls to a movie tonight. It wasn't very good, but we had a lot of fun. They're getting older. They're starting to lie to us. I injured my arm on the docks. 2 days off, then pain meds and back to work. My wife and I celebrated our 10th anniversary by going out to dinner. We walked past the hospital where my father died. It was early evening, and I couldn't help glancing up at the sun in the sky. In the air, as my father would have said. My boss died yesterday. It was unexpected. He was 61, unmarried, no kids. For 5 minutes, the entire dock stopped and stood in silence. Then the whistle blew and we went back to work. There are articles about him in all the newspapers, some of which he owned. His funeral is scheduled for Saturday, and they say it's going to be one of the largest ever. There was almost no one at my father's funeral, just the few living people. Who knew him? I've been feeling increasingly indifferent to things I used to care about. Midlife crisis. Check. I keep listening to music from my youth. I do it on headphones because it's fucking shameful. Sometimes I feel so much nostalgia it hurts. What exactly am I trying to find? I grew up poor. I'm still poor. I'll die poor. My life is stillborn. It never really started.